Hello and welcome to Unacademy IAS English, a one-stop destination for the English medium civil services aspirants. A very good morning and welcome to the daily Hindu news analysis. So let's begin today's discussion by first looking at the topics that we are going to discuss. From the Delhi edition of the Hindu, I have chosen 9 important articles for a thorough analysis. See, generally students ignore the Sunday newspaper, but trust me, don't ever make that mistake because on Sundays, we have a lot of interesting articles, especially for prelims. You can get a lot of key points which could help you answer prelims questions. So do ensure you attend the sessions on Sunday as well. And let's take up the discussion. Let's cover all these topics comprehensively so that you don't have to go back and read the newspaper again. If you guys are liking our initiatives, do support us with your likes, your comments, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. So let's begin the discussion by looking at this important article on page number 1 and a related article on page number 7. The day before yesterday, there was a major anti-Naxal operation carried out in Chhattisgarh. If you remember, yesterday I mentioned this development. We spoke about the anti-Naxal operation, a counter-insurgency operation that was carried out by the security forces, where more than 30 Naxals were killed. This happens to be one of the largest anti-Maoist operations that has been conducted in the state of Chhattisgarh. So let's dive a little deep into this topic because we have related articles in Hindu and even in the Indian Express regarding this significant development. So if you look at Naxalism in India, over the last couple of decades, Naxals have shifted their operational base towards Chhattisgarh and Odisha belt. In the Dandakaranya region, which is a densely forested area, this is where the Naxal leadership has shifted its operational base, and this remains one of the last strongholds of the Naxals. So India has been battling this left-wing extremist problem since 1967. Several states have been affected. Over a period of 5 to 6 decades, more than 180 districts have been affected by Naxal violence. So over the last few years, India has been able to tackle the threat, and the Naxal violence is definitely on the decline, and even the capabilities of the CPI Maoist, which is a designated terrorist organization, has been considerably weakened due to security operations. Along with these stepped up security operations, the government has focused on the developmental issues as well. Because if you evaluate the root cause of left-wing extremism in India, if you consider why Maoism started in 1967 at the Naxalbari village, there are clearly developmental problems involved, from land-related issues to tribal issues and issues in the rural farmer agrarian belt. They have directly contributed to the rise of Naxalism because lack of development and poor governance contributes to the rise of extremist radical ideologies, and Naxalism thrived because of the poor development and the neglect of the central and eastern parts of India. So what we have seen in this year is something that's remarkable. In 2024 alone, more than 180 Naxals have been killed in these ongoing counter-insurgency operations, and especially in Chhattisgarh and Odisha belt. The Naxal presence has been considerably weakened through these security operations. So we should specifically understand why the recent operation conducted in the Bastar division of Chhattisgarh, why is it so significant? To understand this, you need to see where the operation was carried out, the location, the place where the operation took place. In the Bastar division of Chhattisgarh, you have a densely forested area called Abhujmad. Abhujmad happens to be the stronghold of Naxals. In fact, the top Naxal leadership has been based out of here. The Politburo members who have been guiding and leading the Naxal violence against the Indian state, they have been largely cornered in the Abhujmad forest region of Bastar in Chhattisgarh. So security forces, especially the Chhattisgarh state police forces with the support of the central forces, they have been focused on this region because Abhujmad is probably the only place in India where even land survey has not been conducted because of the Naxal presence. even land survey could not be taken up, which highlights the lack of development and administration in the region. Essentially, the local administration had been pushed out, and Naxals would refer to this as a so-called liberated zone. So, clearing the Naxals from this stronghold has been a top priority for Indian security forces. That is the reason why this operation acquires a lot of significance. So, in this year, more than 180 Naxals have been killed across India, and in Abhujmad alone, 97 Naxals have been gunned down by our security forces. So, this clearly highlights how the government has scaled up the counter-insurgency operations. Not just the government of India, but in collaboration with the state governments. Because eventually, tackling the Naxal threat becomes the primary responsibility of the states. The center only supplements the states with additional forces and intelligence and other logistical support. The Modi government has set a target. It has set a target of 2026 to wipe out Maoism from the country. And given the recent success that security forces have seen against Naxals, it appears that as if India is almost headed towards wiping out Naxalism. So, in this recent operation, the Naxals who were targeted, they were part of the PLGA, the People's Liberation Guerrilla Army, which is the armed militant outfit of the CPI Maoist. The Communist Party of India Maoist is a designated terrorist organization under the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act, under the UAPA. This outfit was formed in the year 2004 by merging the erstwhile Naxal groups, that is the PWG, the People's War Group, which used to operate in the Andhra Pradesh, Odisha belt, and the MCCI, the Maoist Communist Center of India, which was mainly centered around Bihar, West Bengal region. So, from 1967 to early 2000, the PWG and MCCI were the primary Naxal or Maoist outfits in the country, operating in two distinct regions of central and eastern India. As these groups were weakened through security operations in 1990s, they eventually formed a strategic alliance. They merged in 2004 to form the CPI Maoist. So, this outfit, which is a left-wing extremist outfit, it has its own armed branch, the PLGA, which is quite well equipped. They have sourced arms and weapons from arms trafficking cartels. They have also looted weapons from our own security forces, and they also produce guns in these local illegal gun-making factories. Especially in Abhujmad, there are illegal gun-making factories as well, set up by the Naxals, which produces local arms and weapons for the PLGA. So, targeting Abhujmad and clearing the Naxal presence in this region was of great significance. So, in this year, India has seen a big success. Chhattisgarh State Police have seen a big success. Out of the 180 plus Naxals who have been eliminated, 97 of them have been killed in Abhujmad division alone. So, this highlights the ongoing progress that India is making in the Naxal heartland. As I said, post 2004, Naxals, when they formed the CPI Maoist, they had shifted the base of operations towards the Chhattisgarh Odisha belt. In places like Dantewad, Bastar, Bijapur, also in Malkangiri in Odisha, Sukma, these have been the last remaining strongholds. And Abhujmad was of particular concern for the government because the Naxals had established a strong presence over here. They would even have some local support by some of the forest dwelling tribes which have been resenting the state due to lack of tribal welfare. So, this made the Naxal presence in Abhujmad a priority as far as countering the Naxal movement is concerned. So, what we have seen in the last couple of days is a significant development. In one operation, 31 Maoists have been killed, and most of them are the top members of the Politburo. They are all the senior and the mid-level commanders. So, this marks a big success for India, and it clearly shows that the extremists have no other option but to give up their violence, surrender and come back into the mainstream. So, on the back of this operation, Union Home Minister Amit Shah has already conducted a high-level meeting with the concerned chief ministers and other stakeholders. Union Home Minister Amit Shah, along with senior officials from Ministry of Home Affairs, they have held a meeting with the top chief ministers of the Naxal affected states. The Naxal affected states like Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, Odisha, even Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra, and Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, and Bihar. These chief ministers have been brought together with a meeting which was attended by Central Armed Police Forces and even by the National Security Council. So in this meeting, the central government with these concerned state governments have taken stock of the situation, and they have reiterated the goal to eliminate Naxalism by March 2026. This is sort of a deadline that the Modi government has set for itself to tackle the left-wing extremist threat. The Home Minister has informed the chief ministers as well that the data clearly shows that Naxal violence and Naxal activity is clearly on the decline. According to Home Ministry's data, Naxal violence has reduced by 72%. If you compare the data from 2010 to 2024, there is a 72% reduction in Naxal violence and Naxal related attacks. There is a 86% decline in Naxal related killings. If you look at the data from 2010 and compare it with 2024, there is a 86% reduction in Naxal killings, which brings down the casualty rate as well. So this is in line with the trend that we have seen over the last 10 to 15 years. In fact, post 2010, the then Manmohan Singh government had stepped up these anti-Naxal operations under the so-called Operation Green Hunt, where the centre went into an aggressive mode and assisted the states to target the Naxals in Chhattisgarh and Odisha. The centre has been supplementing the resources of the states by deploying the CRPF and its Cobra battalion, which specializes in jungle warfare, guerrilla warfare. Even other central armed police forces like BSF, SSB also have been deployed to assist the state police forces. So these operations which have been going on over the last 15 years, they have been primarily intelligence-based, intelligence-led operations. These are targeted precision operations which have been going on over the last 15 years. So the Home Ministry has brought out the data as well. In 2017, for example, the Home Ministry presented data to show the decline in the Red Corridor. Because when Naxalism was at its peak, more than 180 districts in the country were under Naxal influence. Not just central and eastern parts of India, but even few parts of Western Ghats, stretching across Kerala, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, some parts of the Delhi and the Punjab, Haryana belt, even they had seen Naxal activity. Even if you go back to 1980s, which was again a peak period for Naxalism, almost 30% of India's land area had been impacted by Naxal influence. Now compare that with data from 2017, you see a massive reduction in Naxal activity. So Naxals have been pushed into this Dandakaranya region centered around Chhattisgarh and Odisha, and it's only few districts which have been affected by Naxalism in the last few years. So places like Kanker, in fact, earlier this year in the month of April, in Kanker division as well, there was a major anti-Naxal operation. More than 25 Naxals were killed in this operation as well. So apart from that, Bijapur, Dantewad, Sukma, Bastar, Narayanpur and Malkangiri, these are the last few remaining strongholds, and even in Gadchiroli division of Maharashtra, in the Vidarbha Amravati belt, which is a semi-arid region where farmer suicide rates are very high, the Naxals have tapped the sentiments of the agrarian community to create a local support base. So across this region, stretching into Maharashtra, Madhya Pradesh as well, and even Jharkhand, the security forces have stepped up their anti-Naxal operations, and as a result, we are seeing success in our fight against left-wing extremism. Look at this latest data that was presented by the Home Ministry. It clearly shows the significant decline, not just in Naxal violence and killings, but even with regard to the casualty rates suffered by the security forces. there has been a big decline of more than 94% in the number of security forces who have been martyred. The total number of deaths, including civilian deaths, has gone down by 90%. This was based on data from 2022 compared to data from 2010. So in just a span of 12 to 14, 15 years, India has seen this remarkable success against Naxalism. The number of civilians killed has gone down by 87%. The incidence of Naxal attacks has reduced by 76%. Now, if you take data from 2024, the drop in Naxal related violence is at 72% as informed by Home Minister Amit Shah yesterday. The number of districts affected has dropped by more than 50%. So from a peak of 180 plus districts which were under Naxal influence, today hardly around 30 districts in the country remain under Naxal influence. So this is a remarkable success. It shows that the security operations, which are intelligence driven, has yielded the required results to target the militants, the insurgents essentially. And along with that, the developmental approach has addressed some of the genuine root causes which contributed to the rise and spread of Naxalism. The development related issues have been tackled, from addressing the issues of the agrarian community to addressing the issues of tribal welfare and tribal rights, to providing better connectivity and economic growth in the region. So this has brought opportunities to these areas. It has pulled the youth away from Naxal influence, and the local support has been diminishing. So that is the reason why all these developments become very important. So the government believes that we are on the verge of defeating Naxalism, and hence it has set a very ambitious target of March 2026 to wipe out Naxalism from the country. But however, the government should exercise caution as well, because Maoism is a very strong ideological movement. If you look at the principles of Maoism as laid down by Mao Zedong, the leader of the Chinese Communist Party, who led the establishment of the People's Republic of China through the Chinese Civil War, he speaks about a protracted civil war. Maoists believe that they are prepared for a protracted conflict. Even if they are weakened, even if their numbers go down, they will take a step back, they'll regroup, and they can revive the movement as well. And we have seen that happening in India several times. Even in 1970s, 80s, India had weakened Naxalism through security operations, but within few years we saw a revival because the genuine root causes, the developmental issues were never addressed. In 1990s again, the PWG and MCCI both had been targeted and weakened, but we saw them coming together and forming an alliance in 2004 and establishing the CPI Maoist, which led to the resurgence in Naxal activities. So now again, 2 decades later, we have weakened the CPI Maoist and its capabilities, but one cannot be complacent. Even though we have addressed the developmental problems, since it's a very strong ideological movement with ground support, local support being present, India shouldn't be complacent. India can't take this for granted that we will wipe out Naxalism in another couple of years. It's good to have an ambitious target, but it's equally important to look at the ground level situation and ensure we tackle not just the security related issues, but even the development related issues. So that is what we learn from these articles. So please take up a practice question based on this. Naxalites have been severely weakened due to recent step up in counter-insurgency operations, but the fight isn't over. Critically examine. So let's see how you can approach answer writing for such a question. You can start the answer with an introduction where you can talk about the trends in Naxalism. By using the data given by the Home Ministry, right, you can present a broad trend of Naxalism that we have seen over the last 5 to 6 decades. Even if you don't remember the exact numbers, right, you don't have to sit and by heart the data. You can present a broad picture how Naxalism has seen ups and downs and what is the current status today, right. So that could be a good introduction, or you can even talk about the recent step up in anti-Naxal operations which has started yielding results. Even that can be a good introduction. You can base your introduction on current events. You can mention that in 2024 alone, more than 180 Naxals have been killed, especially in the stronghold areas in Chhattisgarh and Odisha. You can even mention Abhujmad and the challenge that India was facing here, how this had turned into a stronghold of the Naxals where the top leadership was holed up, and how Indian forces have eliminated almost close to 100 Naxals in this year alone. So even that could set the right context and it could be a good introduction. Then in the body, discuss the recent operations which are going on in slight detail. Discuss how the center is working with the states, how the state police forces are supplemented with the central armed police forces, and how they are conducting intelligence based operations, how they are dismantling the Naxal network. So you should not only mention the counter-insurgency operations, but you should also talk about the financing routes which have been cut off by our intelligence agencies. The law enforcement and intelligence agencies have stepped up their fight against money laundering and terrorist financing, which has also played a role in weakening the Naxals. So provide those details over here in the body and then conclude your answer. In the conclusion, you need to point out the caution that the government should exercise. Right? You should mention that the government has set a target of 2026 March to eliminate Naxalism, but we can't be complacent. We can't get complacent because we have seen in the past that Naxals have been able to revive themselves even after being weakened significantly. Right? You can even mention that under the Maoist doctrine, the Maoists are urged to fight a protracted conflict, to be prepared for a prolonged war. So they are used to these setbacks. They are prepared to deal with these setbacks. If required, they'll even take a step back. They will regroup and revive and come back stronger. So we have seen that happening multiple times. So mention this feature of the Maoist doctrine. So it shows to the evaluator that you understand the core philosophy of Maoism as well, why it's an inherently violent ideology. And mention that Naxalism should be seen as a protracted conflict, and without addressing the root developmental issues, we may not be able to defeat the ideological movement. You can even take note of the progress seen in development of late. In the last 2-3 decades, India has done much better as far as economic development and good governance is concerned. So there is hope for India to wipe out Naxalism as per the ambitious target, but we can't get complacent. We need to be cautious. We need to keep up the pressure while focusing on development and administration. So that should be your conclusion. So I hope this discussion has helped you. Now let's see how many of you can write an answer to this question. Let's look at another article. See, today's paper is actually dominated by a number of articles related to security and defense. This article is focused on the role of mechanized infantry in warfare, in battlefield warfare. See, around the world, we are seeing various conflicts going on, be it the Ukraine war, the Gaza war, and many other conflicts. So generally, we believe that in today's world of modern technology, we believe that traditional weapons, conventional weapons, and conventional military platforms have become obsolete. They have become outdated. That is a general perception that we all have. In fact, not just civilians, even the armed forces, the strategic establishment in India and around the world, until recently, they believed that conventional military equipment is getting outdated, they are becoming obsolete, especially battle tanks, armored vehicles, even artillery guns, etc. See, there was a point where, say, armed forces, especially the armies, they would depend heavily on the mechanized equipment, from battle tanks to armored vehicles to artillery guns. This has been the mainstay of conventional battlefield warfare. But with advancement in technology, with the emergence of new age weapons, from cyber weapons to drones to other new age weapons, the very nature of warfare was seen to be changing. The nature of warfare has definitely changed with these new age weapons. But the relevance of these conventional weapons remains very valid even today. And this has been established in the recent battlefields. From Ukraine to Gaza to Ladakh, there are lessons as far as battlefield warfare is concerned. So this article is focused upon India's mechanized military equipment with the Indian Army. What plans does the Indian Army have for battle tanks, artillery guns, armored vehicles? What lessons are we drawing from the Ukrainian battlefield especially? How are we applying this in Ladakh, where we face a standoff with China? Because when the recent Ladakh clashes occurred from 2020, both India and China mobilized their mechanized columns into the Himalayan heights. Generally, when you think of the Himalayan battlefield, right, if you imagine the geography, the terrain, you don't think that in such a high altitude, complex terrain, you can deploy tanks and artillery guns, right? Generally, that is not the perception that we have. But both India and China, they basically rewrote the rules of warfare when they both deployed a lot of artilleries and battle tanks and armored vehicles in eastern Ladakh during the recent Ladakh clashes. So let's see what strategy is India employing, how did India counter China, what challenges are we facing when it comes to mechanized infantry, and how are we looking to reform them? How are we drawing lessons from Ukraine and other battlefields? How are we trying to ensure that our mechanized infantry plays a key role in a future battlefield-led warfare? See, if you look at the terrain of Ladakh, it's not just the topography which is complicated, even the climate, the weather plays a very big role. You have extremely low temperatures in winters, especially going up to minus 40 degrees Celsius. Generally, your traditional military equipment are not designed to operate at such low temperatures, especially the military equipment manufactured by other countries which we have imported, which are many years old. They may not be able to function or operate at optimal conditions at such extremely low temperatures. And also don't forget, Ladakh is a high altitude battlefield and the oxygen levels are extremely low. The atmosphere is rarefied. So a lot of equipment may not function. So maintaining the equipment, servicing them, keeping them operational in itself is a huge task. It's a Herculean task for the Indian Army. Apart from that, how do we deploy, how do we mobilize such heavy equipment to the front lines? Because battle tanks, armored vehicles, artillery guns, they're all heavy equipment weighing several tons. How do you airlift them? Because there's no way you can create roads everywhere, right? In such frontline areas, there will be some main arterial roads which have strategic significance. But when you have to deploy them in the battlefield at the front lines, you may not have road connectivity. So the only option is to bring them through the air route to provide for air transportation of artillery equipment and mechanized equipment. So how did India manage this incredible feat? What challenges are we facing and what lessons can we draw from Ukraine and other battlefields? That is what we need to learn. If you look at India's mechanized columns, the mainstay of the Indian Army is the T-90 main battle tank, also called the Bhishma. This is of Russian origin. It's a Russian battle tank considered to be one of the most sophisticated battle tanks in the world. It's the backbone of the Indian Army's mechanized infantry. This has been indigenously produced as well. We have made some upgrades and the T-90 Bhishma remains the mainstay of Indian Army. We also have the BMP-2 armored vehicles that you can see here in the image. Now these armored vehicles and battle tanks, they both have amphibious capabilities, meaning they can cross rivers and water bodies, they can float on water. Because in places like Ladakh, where you have the Indus and its tributaries, at places like Nuanced, it is very essential for the battle tanks and armored vehicles to have the capability to be deployed amphibiously, because they may have to cross rivers and water streams. And during the Ladakh deployment seen in the last 4 years, these mechanized equipment have done phenomenally well. The T-90 Bhishmas and especially the BMP-2 armored vehicles, they have easily crossed these rivers in the Indus basin, right? And they have displayed the amphibious capabilities which has allowed them to be deployed at the front lines. In fact, there was a situation near Panongso Lake when the standoff took place. where Indian tanks and armored vehicles were just 100 meters away from the Chinese battle tanks and armored vehicles. That was the kind of face-off that India-China saw. See, for China, it's any day easier to deploy mechanized infantry because the Tibetan region is largely a plateau. And also China has advanced infrastructure from road to rail connectivity to even air connectivity. So for China, it's much easier to bring in mechanized equipment, but it's much more challenging for India given the challenging Himalayan heights and the terrain and the complications created by climate and weather. Despite this, the Indian Army has done phenomenally well. So the capabilities of the equipment stands proven, but however, maintaining them in an operational condition has been a big challenge because the lubricants dry up and the engines don't even start. I am sure many of you would face problems in starting your vehicles as well during winter. So imagine in places like Ladakh with temperatures at minus 30, minus 40, ensuring that these mechanized equipment keep running. So what Indian Army has done, it has come out with ingenious solutions. It has procured the right fuel and lubricants, maintained the servicing. It has maintained service depots in Ladakh closer to the front lines so that the equipment can be repaired and they can be kept operational throughout the deployment period. The Indian Army also has ensured that the tanks keep running through the night as well. They don't turn them off because in the morning it becomes impossible to restart them. They keep revving up the engine. So these are small operational changes that have been done in the operational doctrine, but this has given very good results for the Indian Army. The Indian Army has been fighting not just the Chinese threat, but it has been fighting other challenges as well, including the challenges created by the terrain, challenges created by the climate, and the logistical challenges. So this is something that's phenomenal. Now, many of you might have a doubt. How exactly did India transport such heavy equipment to the front lines in Ladakh? Now, this is where Indian Air Force played a critical role. The Indian Air Force deployed its transport fleet from the aging AN-32 and IL-76 to the modern C-130s and C-17s. These transport aircrafts were deployed to the front lines to airlift the heavy equipment and deploy them right across the line of actual control. So this has been a remarkable exercise for India. But however, if you look at the ongoing battles, especially the Russia-Ukraine battle, where tanks and artillery and armored vehicles have played a big role, there are some important lessons that we need to learn and incorporate into our military strategies. Because we do deploy the mechanized columns against Pakistan as well. So given the kind of threats we face, both from Pakistan and China, it's very important to learn these lessons from ongoing conflicts and incorporate them into our strategies to modernize our own mechanized infantry and columns. So if you look at the battlefield in Ukraine, Ukraine has efficiently used tanks and artillery vehicles and armored vehicles to push back the Russian invasion. Ukraine has been able to hold its ground, and part of the credit goes to the mechanized forces in the battlefield, which have been fighting back Russia in a very traditional, conventional manner. Even Russia has heavily relied on the mechanized equipment. It has used short-range to long-range shells fired through these artillery guns to decimate the defenses of Ukraine. Russia's battle tanks, which are essentially the battle tanks used by India as well, including the armored vehicles, have proven their capabilities in dominating Ukraine in the battlefield. So there has been a pivotal battle which has been raging between Russia and Ukraine, where mechanized equipment has played a big role. It has made a big comeback in the world of warfare. Now, there are new threats also which have come up. For example, the usage of armed drones and the usage of loitering ammunition. This poses a significant threat to battle tanks, artillery guns, and armored vehicles. Because in an open battlefield, your mechanized infantry and mechanized columns are exposed to any aerial attack. Now, with Ukraine and Russia deploying armed drones and striking targets with precision, Now that they have deployed loitering ammunition, that is short range, medium range rockets which can loiter, especially cruise missiles, they can loiter, maneuver in an area, pick out their target and then strike. We have seen this being deployed in the ongoing conflict in Gaza and Lebanon as well. Armed drones and loitering ammunition has been used with deadly effect by Israel. Even Hamas and Hezbollah, which have been hitting back at Israel, have been deploying armed drones and loitering ammunition. So there are these lessons that we can learn from these battlefields. It shows the vulnerability of mechanized equipment. Battle tanks, armored vehicles, artillery guns can be easily targeted and taken out by the aerial threat. So Indian Army is trying to incorporate those lessons. We are trying to ensure that we can provide air defense cover to make the mechanized columns and the mechanized infantry secure from any aerial attacks. They will also need their own air defense. They should be equipped with air defense guns provided with man pads or air defense rockets which can be fired by a soldier who's carrying the rocket launcher. So such shoulder fired air defense systems and short range air defense systems would be very helpful, and that is something Indian Army is trying to incorporate. Now, other than this, we have recently procured some modern advanced mechanized equipment as well. Recently from South Korea, India procured the K9 Vajra self-propelled howitzers or artillery guns. It's one of the most versatile artillery guns present in the world, and this South Korean defense company has transferred the technology to India, and Larsen & Toubro is domestically producing the K9 Vajra battle tanks. So the K9 Vajra howitzers. These howitzers were also deployed in Ladakh. They were also deployed at the front lines. Again, they were transported through the air route. We've also procured the M777 howitzers from United States. So India has carried out some modern procurement as well. We are not just relying on the old outdated Russian equipment. We have the M777 and the K9 Vajra as well. We are also indigenously developing a light battle tank. The DRDO has recently completed the trials of Zorawar. I think I had covered this in one of the previous classes. It's a recent development. DRDO has finished the field trials of a light battle tank, which is very light in weight. It has been specifically designed keeping in mind the Himalayan terrain that we face with both China and Pakistan. So given its light weight, it can be easily airlifted by the Indian Air Force and deployed to the front lines, even in the punishing terrain of the Himalayas. So these are the advances that India has made. This is the preparedness of India. Now, if you look at China and even other countries, even they are bringing back mechanized infantry and mechanized columns back into battlefield warfare. During the recent clashes in Ladakh, China brought in advanced mechanized equipment from third generation modern light battle tanks to even armored assault vehicles. So the PLA is very, very well equipped in the Tibet region. So given this preparedness of China, it's very essential for India to counter this as well. Because as they say, warfare, right, it's always decided on the battlefield. Eventually, the battlefield results is what matters. Even with new age technology, right, battlefield victories are still very crucial, and that is a lesson that we have drawn from Ukraine and other battlefields. So even other countries are looking at procuring battle tanks and other mechanized equipment. Even European countries, which had moved away from this traditional method of warfare, right, they have started looking at battle tanks and artillery guns and armored vehicles, especially after the Russian invasion. Given the Russian aggression and the Russian threat, many European countries are also looking to procure these new battle tanks and artillery guns and armored vehicles. So please note which are the major countries that produce battle tanks and armored vehicles and artillery guns. Especially when it comes to battle tanks and armored vehicles, it is US and UK and Germany. These are the three major producers. So they will benefit from the ongoing efforts of other countries to procure modern battle tanks and armored vehicles. Recently, for example, Germany provided its advanced battle tanks to Ukraine with American financial support. Right? So Germany is also a major producer, and US and UK, and India is also looking to step up the procurement, and we are looking at all these possible partners with a focus on indigenous development. So as I mentioned, India is all set to deploy the Zorawar light battle tanks along with the required protective measures. The required protective measures are important, especially air defense measures are important to address the vulnerability of ground-based mechanized columns. We saw this playing out in the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict as well. This is something the Indian Army has studied. The recent conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan also involved intense battle on the ground between mechanized columns between Armenia and Azerbaijan. So both sides did make use of battle tanks and artillery guns and armored vehicles. So we are studying all these cases from around the world, right? How Israel has been countering the aerial threats, how Ukraine has used mechanized columns effectively against Russia, how Russia has used drones and loitering ammunition to target Ukrainian mechanized columns. These are the case studies that Indian Army has picked up, and accordingly we are modernizing and preparing our mechanized infantry to gear up for the future battlefield. So this is a very important lesson, and we are looking at a partnership with United States. US has a advanced armored vehicle called the Striker. Indian Army is negotiating with US. There is a possible deal which might happen very soon. So because of all these recent developments, the topic can become very important. Tanks and armored platforms are adapting to the changing nature of warfare. So such a question can be asked. So let's see how many of you can write an answer to this question. You can start your answer by talking about the recent changes or the recent lessons that we can draw from battlefields around the world. You can cite the example of Russia-Ukraine war, Nagorno-Karabakh conflict, or even the lessons drawn from Gaza war and Israel's air defense which it has created, right? So bring those points in the introduction, and then in the body you can discuss the challenges faced by India, how India deployed mechanized columns against China in Ladakh. Give those examples. Point out that mechanized infantry plays a critical role both against Pakistan and China. List out the kind of equipment that we have and the operational challenges we are facing, and how Indian Army is coming out with innovative solutions to overcome the challenges. Then finally conclude that even in the modern world of quick and swift warfare, traditional weapons still remain relevant, right? We had presumed that conventional weapons no longer play a relevant role, but these wars around the world have taught us an important lesson. So with right modernization, mechanized columns and infantry can continue to play a big role even in the future battlefields. So that is the essential conclusion that you can provide to this particular question. So let's see how many of you can write an answer. Next, coming to another article on page 12. It refers to the recent standoff between Israel and the United Nations, especially the UN Secretary General. Recently, Israel has banned the Secretary General of United Nations, Antonio Guterres, from entering the country. He has been declared as persona non grata, meaning Israel has withdrawn his diplomatic cover, which is provided under the Vienna Convention. So thus Israel has barred the entry of UN Secretary General into the country. So the question is, why has Israel done this? And we should also understand the role of UN Secretary General for your prelims, and how is the UN Secretary General appointed? What is the function of the UN Secretary General? These are key facts for your prelims, and you should also know what is going on between Israel and the UN Secretary General. See, ever since the war began last year, Antonio Guterres has been critical of Israel's approach. He has condemned Israel's disproportionate use of force in Gaza, targeting a civilian infrastructure and civilian population. Repeatedly, he has pointed out that Israel is committing atrocities against Palestinians. He has also pointed out how Israel has escalated the tensions recently in Lebanon by targeting Hezbollah. So Israel will naturally take offense to this, right? Israel reacts very aggressively against anyone who doesn't support the country in its war against Hamas, Hezbollah and even Iran. But Israel also has a valid point that the UN Secretary General has never called Hamas or Hezbollah as a terrorist organization. Because few countries look at Hamas and Hezbollah as a terrorist organization, Israel, US and others. But many other countries don't label Hamas, Hezbollah as terror groups. Even India has not labeled Hamas, Hezbollah as terrorist organizations. So UN Secretary General has stuck to that position and Israel opposes that. So Israel has condemned the UN Secretary General that not even once Antonio Guterres has called out these terror attacks. So this has been an ongoing dispute between Israel and UN. In fact, from many years, even before the war started, Israel has always blamed UN, and it is alleged that UN is controlled by the Arab states, which are pro-Palestine, which are in favor of Hamas and Hezbollah. It's an Israeli allegation. But UN has condemned these aggressive tactics of Israel. In fact, even the permanent members of UN Security Council, the P5, even they have condemned this Israeli action to bar the UN Secretary General from entering the country, because this is unprecedented. No country has ever banned the UN Secretary General from entering the country. So let's quickly understand what is the role of the UN Secretary General. How is he appointed? The UN Secretary General heads the UN Secretariat. The UN Secretariat is one of the 6 principal organs of the UN. See, if you go through the UN Charter, which is the constitution of the UN, there are few primary organs like UN General Assembly, UN Security Council, International Court of Justice, etc. UN Secretariat is one of the primary organs. So the Secretariat essentially looks after the administrative work of the UN, and it plays a big role in implementing the initiatives of the UN, from climate change to sustainable development to counter-terrorism to even peacekeeping operations. They are all managed, administered through the UN Secretariat. The entire UN bureaucracy, right, is also managed. The whole cadre of UN diplomats are managed by the UN Secretariat. So all the official work, the executive work, the line work is carried out by the UN Secretariat. So thus it's a very critical organ of the UN. All the resolutions, the decisions of UN Security Council, UN General Assembly, the ECOSOC, they are all eventually implemented through the UN Secretariat. So this organ of the UN is headed by the Secretary General. So this Secretary General is appointed by the UN General Assembly. But however, General Assembly doesn't decide the appointment. It simply carries out the process of the appointment. It only performs the nominal function of fulfilling the appointment. But the candidate comes recommended from the Security Council. Security Council will recommend the Secretary General, and the General Assembly will go ahead and make the appointment. This shows that the appointment of UN Secretary General is controlled by the P5, the 5 permanent members who have the veto. And especially, United States has largely controlled the appointment process. In fact, when India pushes for UN reforms with other countries, this is one of the issues, that the appointment of this key official who heads the UN Secretariat has been controlled by the P5, especially United States. In most cases, UN Secretary Generals have been candidates pushed by the US, backed by the United States. So UNSC recommends the candidate and UNGA has to appoint that candidate as the UN Secretary General. So the Secretary General performs a key function. The Secretary General performs an administrative role in looking after the administration of the UN, be it manpower management, resource management, implementation of all the resolutions and initiatives, from climate change to sustainable development goals. These important development related initiatives are all implemented through the Secretariat. Then even peacekeeping operations of UN peacekeeping forces is overseen by the UN Secretariat through the Office of the UN Secretary General. When conflicts arise, mediating between countries is also one of the mandates of the UN Secretariat and the Secretary General, to act as a neutral mediator to promote peace and stability, which is one of the key objectives of the UN Charter. So this is the function of the Secretary General, and the office has been often politicized, that few countries control the appointment. So currently, the standoff between Israel and UN is nothing new. There is a history behind it. Israel has always accused UN of being manipulated by other countries which are pro-Palestine. But UN dismisses these allegations, and most countries blame Israel for being unnecessarily aggressive against the international organization. So that is what we learn from this important article. Now let's head towards the prelim section and take a quick look at the smaller articles which are relevant for the prelims exam. On page number 4, we have an article referring to the Sundarbans, which is a very important ecosystem. It's a transboundary ecosystem shared between India and Bangladesh. So you can expect environment ecology questions, geography questions from this topic. See, the article is focused on the hardship that the people in the Sundarban Delta are facing. They face many challenges because, see, Sundarbans is home to the majestic Royal Bengal tigers. So the increase in human population and human settlements and the destruction of the mangrove cover has led to increased cases of man-animal conflict. There have been several tiger attacks. So man-animal conflict and managing this environmental challenge has been a major concern in the Sundarbans Delta. And I hope you know Sundarbans is known for its mangrove cover. It has a rich, dense mangrove forest cover which plays a pivotal environmental ecological role. It acts as a natural buffer against high tides and even against cyclones and tsunamis. So the mangrove forest cover has undergone severe degradation. There has been destruction of the ecosystem, right? It's essentially a wetland ecosystem. The wetland has suffered significant damage due to pollution, due to large scale deforestation which has taken place. So it is an ecosystem which is crucial to many species of birds. Wetlands they are very rich in biodiversity, right? So it's a very important bird area even for migratory birds. And there are many important species dependent on them, including aquatic species. So destruction of the wetland and the mangrove cover is a major environmental threat which is affecting the local people because the locals depend on the mangrove forests. They depend on the forest resources for their sustenance. Mangroves have a lot of industrial application as well, from medical industry to cosmetic industry, right? There are a lot of applications for mangrove based products. So the community here depend on them. They even depend on the mangroves for fishing. Within these wetlands, where there are natural pools which are formed because of the mangrove cover, the local people, they promote farming of fish and crabs, right, which is a big source of revenue, right? Even prawn cultivation is a major source of revenue. So any environmental impact on Sundarbans affects the people as well. And also don't forget, the region is highly prone to the impact of cyclones and the rising sea level because of climate change. This is a low-lying delta. It's very vulnerable to the rising sea level. There are fears that it could get submerged in the coming decades, and it's right in the path of the deadly cyclones that form in Bay of Bengal, which causes widespread devastation in the region. So these are the risks and concerns. Now let's see where exactly is Sundarbans located. It's located over here at the junction of India-Bangladesh border facing the Bay of Bengal. It sits at the delta created by the mouth of the Ganga, Brahmaputra and the Meghna river systems. Right? Ganga, Brahmaputra, they flow from India to Bangladesh, merge with multiple rivers forming the gigantic Meghna river system. We also have the Hooghly, a branch of the Ganga, right, that flows from the Indian side into Bay of Bengal. So at the delta of these rivers, this is where the Sundarbans ecosystem is present. This is considered as the world's largest mangrove forest. It's of great environmental value, ecological value. There are multiple UNESCO World Heritage Sites within the Sundarbans. There are at least 4 UNESCO World Heritage Sites, few on Indian side, few on the Bangladeshi side. It is home to the threatened Bengal tigers. It is also a Ramsar site. It is recognized as a wetland of international importance under the Ramsar Convention. We also have a national park and a tiger reserve. So as a result, it's a critical ecosystem both for India, Bangladesh, and without India, Bangladesh working together, we can't conserve and protect this critical ecosystem. So that is what we learned from this article. So it's important for the local community for their economic well-being. It's important for the locals to protect themselves against cyclones and rising sea levels. So these environmental issues affecting Sundarbans needs to be tackled. Next, on page 7, we have an article referring to Queen Durgavati or Rani Durgavati, a legendary historical figure from today's Madhya Pradesh region. The topic is in news because the Madhya Pradesh cabinet has held a meeting at Singrampur, which was the then capital of the Gondwana kingdom, which was led by Rani Durgavati, who was the regent queen. Rani Durgavati is a legendary figure belonging to the Gond tribal community, and after her husband, the king, passed away, her minor son had ascended to the throne. That is when Rani Durgavati in the 16th century, 1550 to 1564, assumed the role of the queen regent or the regent queen and led the Gondwana kingdom in a legendary battle against the Mughal Empire. And it is said that Rani Durgavati and her forces defeated the Mughals in the tribal belt of the Gondwana region. That is why Rani Durgavati is a celebrated tribal figure, right? A leader of the tribal community in the region and also revered and worshipped even today. So Singrampur, where the cabinet meeting was held, was the then capital of the Gondwana kingdom, the seat of Rani Durgavati. So that is what you take away from this article. So to pay tribute to Rani Durgavati on the 500th birth anniversary, the cabinet meeting was held at Singrampur. Next, the Indian Air Force is looking to modernize its air transport fleet. So this article is related to what we studied about mechanized columns and mechanized infantry. I told you that India has been able to mobilize heavy equipment like battle tanks, artillery guns and armored vehicles to the front lines in Ladakh, mainly because of air transport provided by the Indian Air Force. But currently, Indian Air Force is dealing with an aging fleet. See, if you look at the medium transport aircraft, the MTAs that are there with the Indian Air Force, which can lift around 18 to 30 tons of weight. So aircrafts with this capability, right, they are referred to as medium transport aircraft, which can lift around 18 to 30 tons. And they can even fly in high altitude regions and deploy the equipment. So currently, if you look at the medium transport aircrafts of India, we only have outdated aging aircraft like AN-32 and IL-76. These are outdated, we are supposed to retire them. In fact, they are being used beyond their actual service period because Indian Air Force has been facing a challenge of depleting fleet. So there is an urgent requirement to replace the outdated AN-32 and IL-76, and Indian Air Force has floated a contract to look for a global procurement. So many global aviation companies are contending for this mega project. India is looking to procure anywhere between 80 to 100 or even more than 100 medium transport aircraft. So this transport capability will be crucial for the Indian Army, especially for logistical support, not only to lift the troops and the heavy equipment, but even to provide resupplies to the frontline troops who are deployed in places like Ladakh. So India is looking at the Airbus A400, Lockheed Martin's C-130, which we already have, the C-130J Super Hercules, and the Embraer C-390. These are the contenders, and Indian Air Force is likely to shortlist one of them very soon. And experts are suggesting that most likely India would go with the C-130J Super Hercules because Indian Air Force already operates them. It provides tactical airlift capability. It can land in very short runways. It can land in unprepared, semi-prepared runways as well. Right? It doesn't need a proper runway or airbase. And it's also very versatile. It can even be used to deploy special forces behind enemy lines to conduct covert operations. It can even be used to lift medium to heavy weight and deploy them into the front lines. So this is something Indian Air Force has already procured from the United States, from Lockheed Martin. So most experts are pointing out that India might select C-130J again. But however, the deal is still going on. So this is something you need to keep track of. Next, on page 7, we have an article referring to the Shompen tribe of Andaman Nicobar. The Hindu carries an interview with Triloknath Pandit, a former director of Anthropological Survey of India. Triloknath Pandit is probably the only anthropological expert from India, or maybe even the entire world, who has studied all the tribes of Andaman Nicobar and even interacted with all the tribes of Andaman Nicobar. So Triloknath Pandit has tremendous knowledge about the tribal demography of Andaman Nicobar. As you know, there are several tribal groups. You have several large tribal communities like the Nicobarese and the others. There are few reclusive and small groups as well, like the Sentinelese and the Shompen. Some of these tribes are so reclusive that they avoid contact with the outside world, like Sentinelese, for example, who live on the Sentinel Island. They resist any outside connection, and anyone who is attempted to enter the island have even been killed by the tribes. But the focus of this article, this interview, is the Shompen tribe of Nicobar. The Shompen are a semi-nomadic forest-dwelling tribe found in Great Nicobar Island. It's a very small community. Studies have shown the size of this tribe is hardly around 200 to 230 individuals. So it's a community which is on the brink of extinction. They maintain very limited contact with the outside world. They rely on hunting, fishing and such basic practices to sustain themselves. Right? They have stayed away from modern civilization, and the focus of this article here is that the Shompen tribe of Great Nicobar are facing a threat because of the proposed Great Nicobar project. The Modi government has laid out an ambitious plan to transform Great Nicobar into a strategic location, along with military infrastructure, with economic projects, to position Andaman Nicobar as one of the frontline regions of India at a critical location near the Malacca Strait. On Great Nicobar, the government is looking to develop a transshipment terminal, a modern port and an airport with power plants as well. These proposed projects, the Great Nicobar Development Project, will lead to destruction of forests, which will affect the forest-dwelling tribe, that is the Shompen tribe. So Triloknath Pandit, who has studied the Shompen, the Sentinelese and the others, has cautioned the government, because already the required clearances have been provided, environmental clearances and all the essential clearances have been provided, which has allowed the project to almost take off. So Triloknath Pandit is warning the government, cautioning the government that such mega projects could not only lead to destruction of environment, it could even have a big social impact. It could almost wipe out such indigenous tribes like the Shompen of Great Nicobar. So that is what we take away from this article. Next, on page 9, the DRDO has completed the trial of the VSHORAD, Very Short Range Air Defense System. This is an indigenously developed man-portable air defense system. It's a shoulder-fired rocket which an individual soldier can carry and fire them at aerial targets. It's a shoulder-fired air defense system. So it's indigenously developed by the DRDO, and such short-range air defense systems play a very important role in the battlefield. So India is developing the VSHORAD indigenously. It has a very short range to take down low-altitude aerial threats, incoming enemy aircraft and drones, or even incoming loiter ammunition can be targeted with such man-pads or shoulder-fired air defense systems, man-portable air defense systems. Now coming to the last article for today. In the supplement page, Hindu carries the images of a very unique donkey, a unique species of donkey called the Halari donkeys. Now why are we looking at this? Why is it important? The Halari donkeys are very unique. They are native to the Saurashtra region of Gujarat. They are found only in the Saurashtra region of Gujarat, and I hope you know that the Saurashtra region is a arid, semi-arid region, right? The native community here in the Halar region of Saurashtra, they depend on the Halari donkeys. Today, there are very few individuals left. They are domesticated by the local people in Saurashtra and they serve a social and economic purpose. But because of their depleting numbers, they are considered as an endangered species. The Halari donkeys are endangered because of their depleting numbers. But this domesticated animal is considered to be very smart, very intelligent and emotional. The owners who cultivate them, they develop a very close bond with the Halari donkey. And the Halari donkeys provide a milk which is very popular in the Saurashtra region. It's known for its unique taste and sweetness. And they also play a role in transportation. The locals use Halari donkeys for transport, especially transporting goods. They also play a role in local religious customs. When festivals are celebrated, when local trade fairs are held, Halari donkeys are the center of attraction. So this unique animal which is endangered, which plays a unique economical and social role, can be important for the exam. So please know that these Halari donkeys are native to the Halar region in Saurashtra in Gujarat. So on this note, I bring my discussion to an end. I hope you guys have understood all the topics and I hope you guys have liked the session. So if you benefited from the session, do let us know with your comments. Don't forget to press the like button and do subscribe to our channel. That is it. Thanks for watching. Have a good day.